Hey Akash. Okay, let's see if it's my mic's problem. I can't hear you. Can you hear me?
How about now? Can you hear me?
Yeah, it's good now.
Okay, good. It's always so many different setups, switching audio. So
Yeah, it's a lot better than like joining a meeting from the meeting room already. Like I've
yeah,
not successfully joined anything in less than a minute.
yeah, same experience here.
Only if it could be like with the click of a button, like join or something like that. Like you scan a QR code and you say join.
Yeah, right. That'd be the easiest. So
It could be the next like hackathon project or something.
yeah, I'll write
Like
that
if you
down.
save 5 minutes every meeting for everybody, that's a lot of impact.
Yeah.
Since we have a long agenda, should we get started? Hello, Jimmy.
Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, cool.
Was it a good game last night?
It was a practice. So yeah, it was fine.
My kids are not at the age like where I can go to their game yet, but I really look forward to that.
I have two kids that are in college actually, and we probably spent 10, 15 years with them in baseball and softball. And now we have an 11-year-old, and so we're in there with him as well. So it seems like it never ends, I guess.
Sounds really fun. Okay, let me share my screen. Meeting notes. Share, and I'll move my window around a little bit. I'm going to make sure I see the participant list. Let me know if you see any messages or like from people waiting in the lobby. Like sometimes I miss the little pop-up from Zoom. Okay. Can everybody see the screen okay?
Yes.
Thank you. I see, Jimmy, you were able to put out a PR. Thank you for that.
Yeah, if we can get to it tonight, that'd be fine. But if not, no rush because I haven't been able to test it yet. But I wanted to put it in a PR just so we could talk about it if we get to it. But if not, it's no big deal.
We actually do have it a bit. Typically, we go through our PRs through like the first item. So if you're ready to walk us through it, just to provide a high level overview, I think that'll help us review it. Do you think you're ready today?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, let me bring it up. I actually have it right here. Would you like to share your screen, or is it okay
Sure.
if I just let me know I can
Either
scroll?
way, whatever you'd
Okay, let
prefer.
me make you the host, and then that way you can jump between files easily. Make host.
Okay, let me see here. I got all these different windows open.
Yeah, make sure you choose the right one.
Well, let's see. It's painful. All right, let me try this one here. If it's not, then I'll try another one. Can you all see my screen?
Yep.
Yes.
And can you, it's the right one, the PR?
Yes, it's showing the next region.
Okay. So this is a PR to fix a bug that I had unknowingly put in there for the region. My testing didn't catch it the first time. So essentially what I have to do is I have to now add the region to the configuration of the client before I make a call to get the credentials. Let me go and find. Yeah, I love code signing, I think is what's going on. I don't know if that's what it is, but did I misspell registry? All right, well, I'll fix all that later. Let me see if I can find the right file. So yeah, here. So in here, those little messages aren't annoying at all.
Is there a way to hide it?
I don't know. I have no idea.
There's like a little conversation drop down at the top next to like file filters, conversation, setting gear to the left of the screen. I wonder if there's an option to like, oh, okay, it's only PRs.
Okay, let me see if I can find. Well, I thought I had it in the right spot. It's brutal. Yeah. Fantastic. So the main thing that I have to do to make all this work nowadays, or now for this to fix this bug, is to set the config.region before I make the call with the config object to get the actual ECR client and then get the authorization token right after that. So before that, I was not doing that, which was pinning it to whatever region the cluster was in, which is great when you're only testing a single region. But when you have to when you have to go against multiple regions, it doesn't work too well. So and I'm actually working on a whole other project inside AWS right now, and I stumbled across this. So I had to fix this. So, but in order to fix this, it's the way that the original ECR auth was written. It just made a call to get the tokens, and then it just returned the tokens. But now they have to be region specific. So what I had to do to make that work, as far as I know at this point, is I had to change a few things. So on the ECR auth types, I actually had to go in there to where the auth data is and store the auth data as a map of where string for the registry is the key, and then the values are the actual auth data coming from the client call. Because of that, then I had to change all my other functions like expiry and all of that to make sure that I was passing in a host string to make sure that I was getting the right expiry or getting the right basic auth creds in this one right here. So that is basically the crux of this change, is that I've made a bunch of internal changes to both the ECR auth types as well as the basic auth to make sure that now it's going after region specific credentials and storing them in a map and then executing functions against each one of those ECR auth tokens in a, using a registry as the key. I also, I believe it's in here. I think I added in here, I added some functions to get like region from image is kind of a, wrapper function around region from registry and then registry from image. So both of those. So essentially all I did, was, and we talked about this, Akash, earlier, and we weren't going to do the mapping thing, but when I looked at my code again, I'm like, I can't get around that. I need a way to identify for an inbound artifact, the ECR host name will actually be region specific. And so I needed a way to map registry hosts, to the credentials brought back, because that would map it to the region for me automatically. So that's what I'm doing here is, added these utility functions, and then I, made the code changes to the auth type and then the basic, functionality to make sure that everything I do has that map in mind. So, and then also including testing to mock up data that is going to be map specific. And so that's what I've done so far. Please, if you've got any questions, feel free to shout them out.
Yeah, thanks, Jimmy, for the update. Yeah, I think it makes sense to me. A few questions. The utilities that you added, I think there might be some overlap. I think we already have a function that extracts the registry host name. I can dig it up and find under, it might be in a different package, so we might have to elevate that up to common.
Yeah, I think it's in a different package. It might be in here. I can't remember, but I thought I saw something similar to that after I'd added my code.
Mhm.
But I also need region too. So I need both. I need a way to pull the host, and then I need a way to extract from the host the actual region. So I need both of those. So I like, here it is. Artifact host name is calling get registry host from provider, which is, let's see if it's up here somewhere. It's in the Oris auth provider common package. So, I mean, I might be able to get away with using that. I'll do some more, testing on that to make sure I can get away with using that. I mean, the host should be the same. I mean, it's basically just using a URL to actually grab the host. So it should be the same, but then I'll still have to parse that to get the region from it. So I'll still need at least one of my utilities to do that, unless you already have something like that. But I thought that would be AWS specific.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think so far we've only seen AWS who has the region in their host name. So.
Yeah, I mean, the pattern, I was showing it to you here earlier. Maybe, I don't know if you saw it, but
yeah, and the test data, I think.
In the test data, the pattern here basically is the account name, and then this is the prod endpoints, and then whatever region you have. So.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah, so I mean, I wanted to get this out in front of people to get a feel for my approach to this. I don't know any other way around, because I need region specific credentials. It just makes sense to use a host mapping key, for a map of credentials. So I don't know any other way around it. So, but I wanted to put it in PR today, so at least you guys can take a look at it. And then I still have to do some more testing on it and then fix my signing. Yeah, I don't know what's going on with my signing. It says my emails don't match, but I looked in there, my email is in my right email is in the keys, the right email in the global. I don't know what happened. So.
I have a question for Akash. So Akash, in any of our other auth providers, do we make a similar assumption? Like maybe do we take a single, or assume there's only a single cert we need? Or is this something, or have we thought about the potential of like potentially supporting multiple?
Yeah, so the way the auth providers work in general is that it's, at least on the ones on the Azure side that we've implemented, are registry and repository specific. So when the provide function is called, it passes in the entire reference to the image. And today that actually includes the tag or the fully digested version.
Okay.
And then from that, it can extract the host name of the registry, and then it does the whole AD token exchange, and then the registry refresh token exchange.
I see.
And yeah, so, and we don't have the whole region specific issue either. So.
But you have, I mean, if I remember right on the call that you and I were on, you said that, you know, you all have repository level tokens.
Yeah, so we have repository level access tokens. I was looking back at it. Right now, we pass in the full repo level, basically the full reference when we do the exchange to get the refresh token using our version of the global identity provider in Azure AD. That handshake is actually at the host name level. It's not actually at the repository level. The repository level token exchange happens between the refresh token and the access token exchange. So basically, in summary, we can probably remove, like we could just pass in the registry host name because.
So, go ahead.
Yeah, so we could just pass in. So for the auth provider can only be concerned with the host name of the registry rather than the repository and at the image and tag level, because at least for the Azure side too, we don't actually need that portion of it. That portion gets taken care of by the underlying ORS client, which does the refresh token to access token exchange. And we don't, the Ratify's caches and auth providing logic doesn't deal with that part. So if we wanted to go more general, I remember we were talking a little bit about, instead of having it at that such a granular level where you could have an exploding cache size, we could say, hey, we're going to support at a higher level instead.
Yes, I think that's one thing that we talked about. And then I wondered, as I was working on this code, I started to wonder, does it make sense that, you know, let's say there's a use case where I turn on, for a particular cluster, I turn on all sorts of registry authentication, right? And then it's a matter of, even if, is that even possible? Like right now, it's not possible to get the ECR tokens unless you're physically in an AWS account because of the SDK calls that I'm making. So I don't even know that it would be possible to have both of them in there, because I'm assuming that yours would work the same way. You would have to be in an Azure account somewhere for the token, you know, for you to get your credentials. But I was starting to wonder, is there a time frame where we would support you know, provider agnostic credentialing? And if we did, then it would mean that we would have to have some way of mapping credentials to at least, you know, image hosts, if not, you know, the entire thing. But maybe it's a little farther down the road.
Yeah, that's I don't think we've thought of that before. Interesting idea. Okay, yeah.
So far, our auth providers are pretty cloud specific.
Yeah. I mean, the way that I know, the way that mine's written, it is AWS specific, because I'm making calls to the underlying. I'm making calls via the SDK to the, you know, to the account based on a JOT that I'm getting from the account. So there's just no way. I'd have to come up with a different way to get that JOT, which it can be done. It's not the way it's built currently. And my assumption is that it's similar in your case. So. But in any event, you know, I have some more work to do on this one. I just want to get it in front of you and get a feel for, do you see any major issues other than there's, you know, I mean, there's some minor issues of reusing some code, but I just want to make sure there wasn't anything stupid that I was doing that I was missing completely.
No, I think it makes sense to me, at least. Susan, anyone else, any thoughts?
I think the only other thought, Jimmy, is in terms of testing, you have like end-to-ends running that you would need to modify, or is like what's the test coverage on this? Is it unit tests only?
So I've got a request in to try to get credits for this project, but it's not there yet. So as far as end-to-end testing, I'm not sure it's even possible without those credits, right? So my testing to date has been very manual. I don't know how we would be able to do automated end-to-end testing if we didn't have the ability to get into an AWS account at the project level.
Yeah, an account would be required.
And I'm working on it. It's just not, I don't have it yet.
I think Sajid has his hand up.
Yeah, this is not specific to this PR. I don't think I have any concerns with this PR. But I did want to ask maybe folks, Akash and Susan, Bin. There's AD specific code inside the authentication utils. And now because that is there, we also assume that ECR specific auth also comes into this. Is there any way we can partition it in such a way that the cloud specific implementations sit in their own namespace or packages? Because we do have Aura's auth provider for AWS and Azure. Is there a second round of moving things around where we don't have to have anything that is cloud specific within these packages? That's kind of what I was alluding to.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. We would probably need to add in the common folder itself, like a Azure folder, and then under there'd be utils or something common, because I think the reason, Susan, correct me if I'm wrong, the reason we actually moved some of the stuff that was in the Azure specific auth provider utils was because it's shared between the Key Vault workload identity stuff and then the Azure stuff. So
should we have like utils Azure
yeah,
and AWS?
Key Vault is also Azure specific, right? So it kind
Yeah.
of needs to be under that umbrella. So unless that namespace is added, let's say, for example, if the AWS binary should not even have those, if they really didn't want to add it in.
Yeah.
But this makes it hard to not take in all those SDK dependencies. If we ever wanted to partition it off as separate binaries, it becomes harder. So I would say, like, as a follow-up, definitely not as part of this PR, because it looks like a little bit more involved. Going forward, if we can consider splitting this up so that there is nothing that is cloud specific, at least in the top level packages. And then you have special casing. For example, ECR region is actually in the fourth segment of, if you split by dot. ACR we know is actually in the second segment if you look at the data endpoints and whatnot, and if we did do regional endpoints. So I just want us to have an ability where you have to have cloud specific implementations, but it doesn't have to be in one file. And that way, if Jimmy modifies something, you folks don't have to worry about it. And same way, when you modify it, Jimmy doesn't have to worry about it, whether you break an ECR implementation.
Yeah, that's a good point. I will file an issue to track this.
Thank you.
So do you want me to refactor as well to move stuff somewhere, or?
No, I think it's a larger PR. So I'm just
Okay.
I'm trying to avoid heavy lifting in this PR if possible.
Okay. So I'm assuming do we need to see anything else in this PR? Otherwise I'll stop sharing.
No, I'm good. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Jimmy. I can reclaim host and share my screen again. Share. Okay. So this is the only active PR we have. Moving on to the discussion items. Everyone's been making great progress, so we do actually have a few proposals to run through today on the agenda. I see the next one is cosine multi-key support. Just checking. Suganya, is that how I pronounce your name?
Yeah, Suganya, yes.
Hi, I'm Susan, and there's Akash. I believe he's been talking with you about the cosine issues that you filed. Yeah, welcome to the community call. Would you like to do a short introduction about yourself?
Oh, yeah, sure. So I'm Suganya Srinivasan. I'm working in Microsoft commercial software engineering team in the government organization. So right now we are working with Australia Defense and giving them a secure supply chain for the third-party softwares that they buy. So that's when signatures and everything came place, and we thought Ratify is a very good tool for verifying signatures. Like that's the use case that we use right now. And it has also been very good for aggregating all the results. And instead of writing complex regos with Gatekeeper, Ratify simplified much of our logics. So we are very proud to contribute a little contribution towards this great product. And so initially we went with notary signing because that's a Microsoft product, and Ratify is also like supported notary, and it was very easy. And then there was a debate whether to go to notary, cosign, because there were lots of people having different opinions, and there were some political pushes, like US Defense is mostly adopting cosign. So that's where we thought, okay, Ratify has all the Ratify actually supports cosign, and then we were like doing the multi-signature support. Notary supports it, and then I thought, okay, let me do the same for cosign as well, because cosign, while you're validating an image which is signed multiple with the keys, it actually gives a true, like it validates fine if the image is signed with the key that you pass for the cosign. But whereas now, if you see the Ratify, it actually gives an error message whenever we try to validate it against a single key. So let me share my screen and explain what my changes. Host disable participant screen sharing, but that's okay. But I have a PR, like if you can share it.
Oh, sure. It's already active.
Yeah.
That's great. Oh, I see.
Yeah,
Yep.
the first one. Yeah.
Number 728.
Like I had some glitches today morning, and thanks Akash for trying to verify. So yeah, so this screenshot shows why we have to actually do a multi-sign cosign verification, why we have to fix it. Like this is the image, Nginx latest from this repo actually shows like how cosign verifies an image with multiple signatures. Like if you see, I have validated it against two public keys, like cosign.pub and next.pub. And you can see, since it has been signed by both the keys, it actually verifies it fine. Whereas if you come down, like previously the Ratify would just ignore false even if one of the key fails. So what I have done is, like, even if one of the key passes, I'm just returning is success is true, and cosign verification is success, and valid signatures are found. And if you go to my change, it's very simple. Like if you go to the code change. Yeah. So all that I'm doing is, if it is previously, if it is error not equal to null, it just throws error. Whereas what I have changed is, even if one signature passes, like if error is equal to null, which means like it has validated it successfully, I'm just appending the signature, and then the rest of the logic just flows as it. But if you're saying notary, it's actually appending all the signature details, like which has passed, which has not passed. Whereas I have not changed the structure of the cosign verifier result, whereas I'm not sure if it would break the other results and everything. So I have just retained the same structure. So that's why the PR has come out really simple. So yeah, that's from me. Any questions?
I'm just trying to see. So previously, if there's an error, we will return the error. And right now, if we didn't get an error, we append the signature and the verification continues. Is that correct?
Yes, yes, yeah. Because I'm trying to make Ratify multi-sign cosign verification in line with the cosign tool itself, because previously it was different. So since we support it as a verifier, I also feel it should be the same. Like right now, we just give error, which means like the validation has failed, which is a wrong result and it would mislead.
Sounds good to me. Any other feedback? Anyone?
One thing actually, Suganya, that I was just thinking about now, looking at this second time, so I know when the verify image signature method will return an error if the signature validation fails, but I'm wondering if it returns an error for other reasons too. Maybe we should catch the specific signature error, signature validation failure error, instead of just the blanket.
So can you explain more?
So we'd add basically in addition to this. So if there is no error, then we can append to it. And if there is an error that's not the error of a signature validation failure, then we also should return an error, right? Does that kind of make sense?
Oh yeah. So yeah, if it is not validation error, that's right. But even if what are the other types of error that's possible? But even if one fails, so we would be returning an error, right? Like say your image has been signed by 5, and all that we are looking is even if one of the thing is passing. So if there is another error, obviously you will not append that signature into the signatures structure, into the signatures data structure. So it would automatically report the error, or you wanted me to log it?
I see. Yeah, that's a good point, because we don't want to just short circuit early for an error on a signature you found earlier. So ideally we would alter the verifier reports like you were mentioning, so it would have a breakdown of each one. But that I'm not sure how involved and what work that'll require.
Right.
So I guess for now, I think this works for now.
Yep.
Unless someone else has other concerns.
I'm trying to figure out what happens when you actually do see an error. What does the flow look like?
Are there any other error catching after? Let's see if I can bring up the whole file.
Yes, searching for a specific error might be okay, but otherwise we end up blanket ignoring everything, right?
Yeah, I think even if we find an error, if we search for a specific error that's not related to so we find something that's not a signature validation error, I think the question was, what do we do with it now? Because we don't want to return. Currently, there's only one verifier report generated for all of the image signatures stored in that single cosign image. So do we log it like Suganya was mentioning? Ideally, we would have multiple verifier reports for each of the signatures that we encounter. And then we'd return that whole batch. And then at that level, you can specify, oh, there was an error for this signature, and here's what the error message was, versus, if that kind of makes sense.
What?
Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, quick question, Akash. With our policies, do we have any policy today that says, okay, if you have 5 signature, if there's any of them that's valid, then we should produce a success result?
Yeah, so that's if we, because this only generates one verifier result, like you see at the bottom, the policy will treat it as if there was one signature or one of that type that was verified versus 5 of those types. So yeah, the policy provider also would be slightly inconsistent. So ideally we need to return multiple verifier results. if you have multiple signatures.
And it's then up to the executor to determine if the overall result based on the policy.
Yes.
And it kind of ties in with Binbin's proposal about redesigning the policy provider.
Yeah.
So Suganya, just a question on how urgent you need the fix. So we do have an item, Binbin has an item to redesign the policy provider, which we can also take this use case into consideration, but that might take a few weeks. Or maybe if you need this right now, we can take a short-term fix and then address it in the long term over the next few weeks. So what's the timing you're looking at?
We might so we might have some demos or something like that. So if I'm not sure what's your take on getting these short-term fixes and going up with the right fix later. So maybe I can use my own forked version of Ratify if I have to demo this, or if it doesn't bother you much, I'm happy if you guys can merge it. Yeah.
I think we can use the PR as like a discussion thread, and we'll evaluate the impact. And then we can also look at the timeline for Binbin's policy provider, and we can use the thread as a discussion to decide on the next step. Does that sound good?
Yeah. So I'm still not understanding how can the policy provider address this? Maybe I don't have a full context on the policy provider. I just used it as a config in testing this one.
Yeah, we're actually, the next agenda item on the list is going through the proposal for the policy provider redesign. There are multiple properties that we're thinking that what do we do when there's multiple verifiers configured? What happens when there's multiple artifacts of the same type? And then we provide, like Binbin is proposing to add new properties to allow the customer to configure all these little things at the artifact level. So maybe Binbin, if you want to go through the design, and then we can also see if the cosign scenario that we're currently looking at, is it being considered?
Right. Okay.
Binbin, are you happy to go through that next? Because Shravani, I don't think Shravani is on the call today, so we can follow up with her on the website proposal, maybe in the next community meeting.
Sure, we can go through the design doc.
I want to ask folks another question. All this PR does is it's avoiding short circuiting when one signature fails, right?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
Do folks have a concern of taking it in and then working on top? Or because right now I think the problem is that if it's not the first signature, it just bails out. And even if it's the second signature, that's good enough. Binbin, are you planning to introduce something like an any policy or some expression policy for this one? Is that what the idea is?
Yes, so in my design, I will introduce a few different policies. One is about the multiple artifact rule, so which means like, how do we handle the case that there are like a few artifacts of the same type? So in this case, it will be a few like cosign signatures, and if it's any, that means we only need one. I think in this PI, it requires any policy.
Correct.
And if it's set to also, that means it falls back to our original code that we require all of them to be passed.
Okay, so are all the verifiers written with
All verifier rule means that if we have a few a few verifiers of the same type. For example, if we configured like 5 notation verifiers and set the behavior what we do for 5 notation verifiers, and for the multiple artifact rules, that means if we have for example 5 artifacts or 5 notation signatures, and how do we handle in this case? That's different policy.
Right. So before we get into the policy discussion, I had a
Yes.
question for you folks. Is the notation verifier verifying any signature and the cosign only verifying one? Is there similarity in the behaviors?
So yeah, sorry, go for it.
Oh, go ahead.
No, so the notation is, so the other verifiers are slightly different in that they assume that you're returning one, you're validating one signature, and that's it. Cosign is, the way the cosign verifier is written, it's a little bit different because the reference is an image which has multiple signatures inside of it, and then you're technically verifying each one of those independently. So the notary one is just doing one, and then the cosign one is doing multiple signatures. So notations verifier is okay to return a single verifier result because it's only verifying one signature. But the cosign one, if we want to implement like this all versus any policy, which is the change essentially being proposed, you're doing it at the verifier hard code level versus bubbling that up to the policy provider when it's redesigned to make that decision.
Okay.
So fundamentally, we need to change what the cosign verifier returns. And I think, yeah, we would need to revisit this. This might be a little bit of a bigger change.
That's what I think Luis kind of like already described what I was going to suggest, which is, can we open an issue and maybe add a to-do on this PR saying that we need to follow up with the fix, but let's take the PR in and maybe suggest a change for a comment in there just to unblock people along the way.
Sounds good. Yep.
And to clarify, Akash, if we were to implement a multi-artifact rule on a generic level, on the policy provider level, what you're saying is there need to be specific changes in the cosign verifier report path.
Yeah, because right now the verifier is returning one report, right? And the assumption for all of the verifiers had been one report means one actual item you're verifying. But for cosign, it's actually could be verifying multiple things under the hood. So it's not the correct mapping. Yeah, so we need to fix that for it to work properly.
Got it. Yeah, in that case, I can create a tracking item for this cosign specific work.
Yes, sounds good.
Sounds good. And for Suganya's PR, we were talking about for the short-term fix, do we want to catch a more specific error to continue the next signature? Is that the requested change here?
I think slightly different in that even if we catch a more specific error, or if there is an error that's not related to signature verification, what do you do with the error? We shouldn't return early because then you're missing out on other signatures potentially. Or really what we can do at this point is just log it if that's of interest. But I don't know if that's useful at this point. So we would probably want to revisit it and properly fix this. But this would unblock at least the multi-signature scenario.
So for the short term, the feedback is continue on all error and just log it.
Yeah, I would vote for logging for now. at least people will get to see what the error is, and then we can fix it once we start seeing the logs.
Does that sound okay, Suganya? Like we're
Yeah.
clear?
Yeah, sure. I can add the logging to this. It's just again a 1 or 2 line change. I can add logging as well to this today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Cool. Back to you, Binbin. Let me bring up the right page.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, and I'll be ready to scroll when you tell me.
Okay, cool. So yeah, so I think we don't have much time left. I will try to be fast. So yeah, the background is that the current config policy is very like primitive, and we want to support a lot of new like features, and also there are some like bugs in the nested verification. So so can you scroll down a bit? So yeah, currently we have like 3 issues related to the policy provider, and my point is to like, firstly, we need to address those issues, and then we also want to see if policy can be extended in the future. And so in the architecture, the current policy is just a map from the artifact type to the policy. And so in the new policy, I want it to be like something like an artifact tree. So Susan can scroll down a bit to the new config. Yeah, so in this new policy, we have 3 different policies. One is at the root node, which stands for the policy set over different kind of artifact types. So for example, if some image have like notation and cosine signatures, what we want to do for like different kind of like signatures of the artifacts. So we can set any or all. I think in the current policy, in the current config policy, the behavior is just all. And once if there is an error happening for the one artifact, it will fail the validation. And in this new policy, we can set any or. Also, we can remove it to force like all artifact types should always be valid. And then there are another 2 policies or rules. One is called multiple verifier rule. So because Certec had a issue that we want to support like multiple verifiers for the same artifact type, but actually the current policy doesn't support that. So I just add this to the object of the artifact type, and it can be set to any or end. And for the multiple artifact rule, which is the same as the current policy set for the same if there are like multiple artifacts of the same type, which we can do like any or end, which means like we can like take one signature, or we need to take all signatures as passed. And also there is an additional like field, which is a set uniform nested policies. Yeah, it was not this name, but I checked the comment from the architect's comment and changed the name. So because the current config policy doesn't like restrict the depth of the like nested relationship. So if there are like for example, we have like 100 layers in some like image, we will do like verification one by one until the like 100 layers. And so we want to add some restriction on the max nested depth. So to avoid a lot of like unnecessary verifications. So if we enable this policy, and we must specify the max nested depth, but I'm thinking if users forget to set this like max depth, maybe we should have a default value instead of make it like unbounded. And also I have like a nested policy under each like artifact tab. So the nested policy is the same as the root policy. It's just so for each like policy with the artifact tabs list, it's just like a node in this like policy tree. And that's for the policy config. Is there any question for it?
Yeah.
So
I'll scroll down a little bit to bring up the definitions for each property.
So you have verifiers as any, multiple verifiers as any, which means that what does that mean? That any of these verifiers can succeed? Is that what we're saying?
Any means that we can have we should have at least one verifier passes. Like for example, if we configure like 3 notation verifiers, if one of them passes, then the result would be success.
It's for the
yeah,
cosine use case.
no, are we trying to avoid listing which verifiers there by using any, or should we just use an array of these are the verifiers that are required for that specific artifact? But even
So I
with,
think the original use case, like for cosine, there's the keyless signatures, and then there is the signatures that needs to be validated with a specific key.
right.
So then the requirement is like, can we configure 2 cosine verifier?
Yes.
Wow. Okay.
So actually, I have a
you have an
like item
example.
in the future work, and I mentioned that maybe in the future we want to list the like verifier, like for example, the verifier names in this policy instead of just a set or end.
I was going with that. Like, even if you have a set, right, you do want to say that in the set you want either of them or all of them, or that any or all, I see the value. Like for notation, you want maybe I just want some signature, as long as one signature is valid, it's okay. But you have specified the scope. Do you have examples? It might be easier for the scenario to be clear.
Yeah, I can add an example.
Okay. Right.
Yeah, so
Feel like I'm not understanding it. I just feel very dumb, but seems like maybe a couple of examples of these multiple configurations will help in this scenario. Maybe we can use the one currently that we're discussing, which is cosine with one signature. Then, like you said, notation with one or many or multiple signatures if you want both keys to be present, or signature with both to be existing, and things like that.
yeah, sure. Yeah, so then can you scroll down to the next section? Yeah, so this part is about how the executor works with the new policy. So I think for the policy provider, I try to keep the original APIs. So there would be no change to the API signatures. And for but because we want to support like multi threads, and also once we are done with that, we should have something to keep changing in each like nested verification. So I have 3 possible ways. and one is seems like Akash should vote for the first one, which once we run a nested like verification, we would create a new policy enforcer. And with this policy enforcer, we will have a new like relevant policy. For example, like maybe the root node or maybe a leaf node. So that would minimize the changes to both executor and the policy enforcer. And the only overhead is that like creating a new enforcer and a new like relevant policy.
May I ask a very silly question?
Yeah.
Can we model this with canned regos? Like basically what you're saying with any is actually a pre-canned rego expression in some form, right? Like, can the policy enforcer just be, if the name is this, then just use, but you can override it with a custom rego if you really want to.
Yes, we can also do that.
Again, it was just a question. So, but if you have, if you have a better option, please go.
Yeah, but I'm thinking so if you use a specified policy in Rego, and then we do the conversion in Ratify, I think.
Yeah. So when you have any, basically what you're saying is match any of these, right? And then that
Yeah.
Could we translate that into just another rego policy internally, but there's a usability experience where people don't need to know how to write that rego policy. But if they want to go full on, they could just specify a custom rego policy for any of these. And at each level, like you have a policy enforcer, but you know at that level what the rego expression might be. I don't know. I'm just throwing something out there. The reason is that the more hard-coded options you have, the more you'll have to maintain them. And that way, if you version them, next version you can have an additive policy without having to worry about breaking existing, and they can take a dependency on a pre-canned set always. I see this as goodness more than as a must-have, right? Like if you have a way to define it at a much more higher abstraction level. Because I'm just asking you have three options. Do we want to have generic policy enforcer that walks through, but each time you come across a config and you know that use the policy of this specific type, it's a pre-canned policy type that you can use for any, like it can be ratify.any application /policy.ratify.any, which would give you this any policy if needed.
Oh, okay, I'll consider this. Yeah, so for the open question, I was wondering if we want to introduce this set uniform nested policy field, or maybe we can just remove it and enforce that users always specify that like policy tree all the time. And also I wonder if we want to remove the top policy field, so require all artifacts should pass the validation. So which is just the same as the current policy behavior. Yes, that's just two open questions. We can discuss it offline. And for the future work, one is that we want to like, because in the current value file config, we would specify the nested references for some artifact types. So I'm thinking if we should move this just to the policy instead of in the value file. And also because we have this configured in the value file, so the actual checking of if we want to do the nested verification is also on the value file. So we should move this logic to the policy enforcer instead of in the value file. And also the second task would be like support multiple verifiers with their names. And those names are just from the verified config. For example, in the first test, the name is spam. So we would just list the spam or spam1, spam2, those names in the policy instead of just specifying any or all. And also one more task, which is mentioned by Susan, we probably for this config, we should set it as a CRD instead of just a config, a JSON config, yeah.
We're at time today, but I think we can use the document and continue our discussion on the thread. But I just want to quickly check with Jimmy and Toddy while you're on the call. Do you have any like high-level feedback on the redesigning the policy provider?
No.
So I was a little confused about the questions that were being asked about allowing Rego to do this, or allowing Rego to specify. I mean, are we saying from the gatekeeper layer, allow pushing something in from Rego to specify a particular verifier setting?
So there's a mix of and or, I mean, and any and
Oh,
other,
okay.
other relationships within this. Like say, for example, if you have one signature or do you want to do multiple signatures? I remember initially we considered moving this all up into Gatekeeper as a configuration, and then Gatekeeper could make the decision.
That's what I remember as well, like sending the entire payload up, and we decided not to do that yet, right?
Right. So I want to kind of like at least make sure we've thought through that before we go down this path. But if we have, yeah,
go ahead. Go ahead.
You know, if we had pre-canned definitions of all these kind of options, then where do we stop? My concern is it just explode in terms of permutations that this thing might end up with. Scope creep is what I'm worried about. So
yeah, I kind of agree there. I mean, I was thinking it would also thin this layer out a little bit if we were to send the payload back and allow Gatekeeper to crunch whatever it needed to, I guess. So yeah, I'm kind of in the same boat. But that's it. That's all I have.
Bin, we previously had this mode, pass-through mode, and the idea is like the Ratify executor would pass the report, the verifier reports back to Gatekeeper, and then the Rego would be specified in the Gatekeeper layer. Are you, I don't know if you joined the project when we had that discussion. Do you recall the pass-through mode that Eric worked on?
I have no idea of that. I will check it after the meeting.
Yeah, let's have a follow-up on that, and we can also walk through the requirements again, and like with what we have today, what does pass-through mode mean for each scenario?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, is Toddy still on the call? Toddy, do you have any feedback?
No, I don't. Thanks.
Okay. All right. Thanks for the discussion, everyone. Bin, if we need another session, we can talk like follow up on the policy provider next time.
Yeah, sure. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just want to throw something out there as well. I mean, I realize that the current solution end to end is, you know, connected directly to Gatekeeper. However, if we were to pass the entire thing back to Gatekeeper, then I think, would that make it better or worse as far as maybe another policy as code tool could be the front end of this? So it's just a thought to think about if we pick this discussion up again.
I was kind of like slowly leading to that, which was still have something like Rego or OPA in between before we pass it to gatekeeper might be enable us to even run it as a CLI and things like that. I think we're saying the same thing, but I'm not.
Okay.
I haven't thought
Yeah.
about it really yet.
We had a tracking item support Rego as a policy provider. I remember that now. Bin, I'll also find that tracking issue and I'll send it over for context.
Thank you.
Just one final point, just like this, I guess OPA would work in the Kubernetes scenario with gatekeeper, but the CLI, you run the verify command, what is it going to return apart from the full verify report? So we're still, depending on which scenario you want to target, we might have an issue. So
Makes sense.
Yeah, I think a year has passed and now like we're more clear on the requirements that we have to support, and it's time to revisit this again. Yeah. Okay. Thanks for joining, everybody. See you next week.
Bye.
Oh, and Akash, we'll bring your item up for next week.
sure, sounds good. Great.
Yeah. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.